What's up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, we're gonna be talking about Giant Size X-Men #1 by AEW superstar, the native beast, Nyla Rose, as well as Steve Orlando and David Cutler. And in this video, we are going to talk about how Thunderbird's resurrection, as well as his return back home to Arizona, is going to shine light on an organization that is secretly working with Orchis, as well as revealing yet another Judas. We're going to talk about all this and more right now, but first, let's hit that intro.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
One of the things I wanted to get out of the way is that I'm not usually the hugest fan of giant size issues and a lot of the one-shot issues that people are probably a little bit more accustomed to with the X-Men throughout the years. Usually these books, while sometimes they're interesting, sometimes I don't know, I just kind of always feel like they don't really go anywhere. With exceptions here or there, I wasn't really the hugest fan of the recent crop of giant size X-Men issues after House of X came out, but this one, I gotta admit, is more up my alley because it is more of a complete story as rather than just a bunch of little small stories spread out, and even in some cases some teases of things that took well over a year and some change to get here. What there is to love about this issue is that AEW superstar Nyla Rose makes her comic book debut with this issue, and I gotta admit, I wasn't really sure exactly how this would turn out. I've never really known Nyla Rose for her writing, but I gotta admit, she does a really good job in this book. Now, you're probably wondering, how the hell would Nyla Rose, have some kind of insight into the mind of a character like Thunderbird? Well, as it turns out, a lot. Now, Nyla Rose is not descended from the Apache or anything like that, but Nyla Rose is both half black and Native American and hails from the Oneida Nation. I kind of feel like Steve Orlando is mostly here just to make sure that everything kind of fits into a nice, neat little package along with all the rest of the X-Men line. Otherwise, I actually think Nyla Rose could have handled this book largely by herself. Now, I'm not, hating on Steve Orlando being here, but it's just one of those things that I kind of felt like, oh wow, this actually works. They work very well together in this, and of course, David Cutler handles the job pretty damn well himself. I didn't know any of this prior, but David Cutler hails from the Halibo Mi'kmaq First Nation, which I had no idea. I was not aware of this in any way, shape, form, or fashion, and I thought it was pretty interesting that Marvel put together this diverse team that came together and created this really awesome story. The story itself is pretty simple. Of course, as of Trial of Magneto #5, Thunderbird was resurrected. He is now back. He is also going to be on X-Men Red, as was showcased in the previous issue of X-Men Red #1. But right now, he has no idea what his place is on Krakoa, and he kind of gets the idea that Krakoa isn't really for him. He's even gone as far as to say that he doesn't trust anything that's going on the island, much less the planet Arakko. It's actually a huge point of a plot for him in X-Men Red, even so much as why he's throwing in his lot with Sunspot, who is also by proxy throwing in his lot with Storm and Magneto to create a new brotherhood, because none of them believe that anything is as it should be. And of course, Thunderbird has voiced his concerns in Vita Ayala's New Mutants with his own little brother Warpath. And then if you couple all this with Thunderbird's previous history with Xavier and how he's never really felt like he belonged in the X-Men and kind of felt as though he himself was, kind of put into a box and also kind of marginalized himself within the X-Men, it's not hard to believe that Thunderbird isn't happy about any of this. Yeah, sure, he's happy to be alive, but is he grateful to Xavier? No, not really. What I love about this book most is how much it showcases how Thunderbird is having to try and figure out how to walk into different worlds, whereas he is trying to figure out how to be both a good Apache as well as a good mutant. In a way, I can kind of tell that, a lot of this was shorthand for how Nyla Rose probably likely felt growing up trying to figure out how to walk in both worlds, being both black as well as being Native American. And I'm pretty sure being a part of the LGBTQ community is also even, kind of tossed in there as well for herself. So this is one of the situations where I felt, oh yeah, this is, probably a lot of personal experience being thrown in here and used to tell a really cool story. All of this kind of comes to a head when he returns to Arizona to meet up with his grandmother, Lozen Proudstar, only to discover that she's not home. Some organization came to the reservation, asked for the reservation to give up any and all mutants who lived there, and all of the elders of the reservation said no. So all of them were rounded up and arrested and taken into what are essentially detention, and were very likely going to be killed. All of this is being done at the behest of an organization that we haven't seen in a few years in Marvel Comics. This is all the work of the Heritage Initiative, and for those who are not familiar, the Heritage Initiative is something that was introduced as an anti-mutant organization back in X-Men Gold Volume 2 in 2017. They're being dusted off and reintroduced here, also in tandem with another character by the name of Martinik, a guy who's mostly known for genetically manipulating himself into being, for all intents and purposes, a werewolf. Not only is this organization trying to round up mutants, but they're also treating them as government property. And we discover that what they're doing is any mutants that they're able to round up, they take back to their facility and harvest them, including their X gene, and repurposing them for other technological and scientific advancements. There's even a point where they mention that they took another certain mutant who has the power to emit a death aura, harnessing that X gene and implementing it into an email system that if anyone read the email or any email under their system that wasn't supposed to, they would die. Now, the character that they're talking about here is a character by the name of Revelations. They kind of throw the name out in air quotes, but this is a character who pretty much only appeared in a handful of comics, namely the Wolverine Punisher Revelation series from back in 1999 by Tom Snagoski, Christopher Golden, and Pat Lee. This is a deep cut. No one ever really talks about this comic. Revelation was a character from this series who perpetually unleashed a death aura around herself. And this is also something that she can't control. At the time, the only people who could stand up to her were anyone with a healing factor. You had Wolverine, who has a healing factor, and Punisher, who still had the powers of an angel. And that was pretty much the reason why they were the ones to take her down. Now, the Heritage Initiative had nothing to do with killing her, at least as far as we know. Something tells me they probably just happened to find her remains, and we haven't seen her since the finale of that 4-part miniseries, after Punisher uses angelic abilities to show her that there was still hope for her and that she could be redeemed. This is what led to her helping Wolverine and Punisher, and ultimately her getting killed. I would imagine if they tried to bring her back on Krakoa, we would have heard about it by now. So yeah, I don't think the Heritage Initiative is responsible for this. They're just co-opting her genetics. But in the end, the Heritage Initiative is working with Orchis on some level, and while we don't see the face behind the Heritage organization that is calling the shots behind the scenes, I do have a sneaky suspicion it's a character that we've already been introduced to. A character by the name of Lydia Nance. Now, the only reason I say this is because, well, for one, Lydia Nance is the leader of the Heritage Initiative during the events of X-Men Gold. On top of that, even though she's dressed a little bit differently than what we may be accustomed to seeing her as, those pearls that she often likes to wear are very visible in the shot when she is actually shown. So I'm going to limit say this is Lydia Nance. For those unfamiliar with Lydia Nance, she has this major, ultra, mega hard-on for anti-mutant sentiment, largely because her father was a mutant and he used to physically and emotionally abuse her. This kind of turned her into the anti-mutant monster of a human as we know her today. Take everything you probably seen or heard about Fox News anchor Laura Ingraham and apply it to a Marvel Comics villain who is an anti-mutant bigot, and you'd basically have Lydia Nance. But yeah, it's no surprise that Orchis is working with this organization, because Orchis is actually starting to reach out to other individuals. Now, we also know that there's a data page that is sent from the character Martinik, with the recipient being listed as a friend and fellow Judas. Now, this is very likely in reference to what we saw in regards to Brimstone Love in Marauders Annual #1 very recently. Is he actually talking to Brimstone Love? Maybe, but something tells me that Brimstone Love and Martinik are far from the only Judases that are going to be brought up. Now, the real question is, why the name Judas? Now, of course, we know Judas, biblically speaking, is responsible for the betrayal of Jesus. So usually when someone refers to another person as a Judas, it's usually in a way of calling them a traitor. But who are they betraying? Because Martinik is a human being. He is a human mutate by all accounts. He's not a mutant. Brimstone Love, it's nebulous as to whether or not he is or is not. In the original X-Men 2099 series, he was never mentioned as being a mutant, but for whatever reason, in this particular iteration of Brimstone Love in the Earth 616 universe, it seems that he is. So it's hard to say exactly what all this is going on here. But I definitely do believe that these are not the last of the Judases that we're going to see. I'm gonna go ahead and throw out on a limb here that we're very likely also gonna witness more McTaggart involved in all this. We already know that she's made contact with Orchis, and something tells me Dr. Stasis is also gonna be involved in this to some degree. I mean, he is working with Orchis, but it also seems Dr. Stasis has other plans going on. So everybody that's involved in all this, everybody is pulling in different directions. We know that Nimrod, as well as Omega Sentinel, they have their own plans within Orchis. Their main goal is not Orchis's overall main goal. And of course, as we just said with Mora, she has her own goals as well. She's not necessarily in on the whole Orchis thing, but she's in it just to, do what needs doing. We also know that Abigail Brand is also involved in Orchis, as well as a bunch of other characters. MODOK is even apparently involved as well. So it's hard to say exactly where it is this is all going, but all of this kind of reads to me like there's organizations within organizations, or rather cells within organizations. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing, and they're in it for whatever it is they're in it for, even if they're not 100% on board with the main goal overall. However, the Heritage Initiative, they're definitely in it for whatever it is that Orchis is cooking up. But as far as this Judas thing, that's a whole other story altogether. I'm honestly going to go on a limb and say that whoever these people are, if they are actually throwing in their lot with Orchis, something tells me they're going to end up betraying them as well sometime down the road. This is a very solid story about self-discovery and acceptance, learning to overcome your darker instincts, and putting your principles first above all else. There's lots of really awesome commentary in this book, like stuff that I think is just really important, and I would even dare say incredibly timely. There's also little Easter eggs and stuff like that in here as well for those that are keen enough to look for them. Even some nods towards Nyla's own profession, bringing up characters like Titania and Screaming Mimi, mentioning that they are wrestlers. I thought it was pretty cool. It's, it's nice little nods and stuff like that I really enjoy. But anyways, that's everything I wanted to talk about here with Giant Size X-Men Thunderbird #1. Let me know what you thought about it. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.